work is a big thing, but it's not everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you do not need to be identified by your title, by the dollar that comes in the door every 2 weeks. I think at the end of the day, like, there's not enough money in the world to make me happy. I've taken pay cuts for certain positions, and it was the best decision.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of A Higher Purpose, a Vanderbloemen podcast. I'm your host, Brett Connolly, and joining me, we're back.
We're back.
We're actually back. Like, this one feels special.
This one's
Sarah Gonzalez.
Oh, I'm back.
Would you like to share why this is a special we're back?
Yes, special we're back because I've been gone for a couple weeks. I was slightly busy. I had a baby. Don't freak out.
Can I just say a couple of weeks means like 2 weeks? It's been more than 2 weeks.
I've been gone for like 2.5 months. I had a baby, a little baby boy. His name's Graham. I'm obsessed with him. I love being a mother. Always wanted to be a mom. He's the cutest little thing in the entire world. Came 5 weeks early, kind of shocked us, but we're here. He's healthy. I'm healthy. And we're back.
We're back.
To pot it up.
And it feels good because this guest was actually supposed to be on before the baby arrived, but like you just said, Graham was like, I'm ready to be a part of
He wanted to be a part of
the
society.
earth and society. And so we're really pumped for this week's episode with Christa. She's someone who worked at Vanderbloemen for a number of years. She, everything that she touched at Vanderbloemen was successful, and she grew in her role in like 2 or 3 different ways. And then eventually she was called to a ministry in College Station called Breakaway. She'll share a little bit more about that in the episode if you don't know what that is, but it's a very complex ministry where she's getting to be a director of operations, and she is doing an awesome job, and she's a young leader. And so I think this will be really applicable for people starting off in their careers. And she even has a little bit of a pitfall in the middle there as well that she'll share. And so we're very much looking forward to seeing the fruits of this episode. Yeah. And we're so back.
We're so back. I can't wait.
It feels good to say that. Finally, it's been like 3 months. So let's go. Christa, I just want to say it's been a privilege to be a part of your story, you know, as you've gone through Vanderbloemen and you've been in several different roles. And now you're in a really exciting role over the last couple of years. And so one may look, if you're watching on YouTube, you're pretty young, but your resume looks like you have, just years and years and years of experience. Can you tell us just a little bit about your journey and the climbing of the ladder, if you will, and how you haven't let that go to your head, or have you?
Hopefully not. I'm realizing today that you have been a full part of the story, like down to my very first interview at Vanderbloemen.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like, when you were a recruiter, you phone screened me.
Wow.
Back in the day.
Isn't that funny?
And that was when you were an intern?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I started, I guess, kind of the beginning of the story, intern for, I guess, the end of my college, like whole year at Vanderbloemen on the marketing team. And Brett was part of my phone screen process. They brought me in, and he was actually in a phone booth, and he was interviewing someone, and they were like, "This is the guy you talked to," and like pulled him out. You remember that?
I was right over there.
Were you in the middle of another call?
I was literally on a phone interview, and someone knocks on the window, and it's Holly Tate and you, Christa. And then I was like,
mid-interview?
I don't really know who that was. I only saw like your picture from your resume, and I was like, maybe that was the person I phone interviewed for the marketing internship.
Maybe.
And then Holly was like, that was Christa. And I was like,
Cool.
Better hire her. She's really good. Yep.
So I started as an intern for a year at Vanderbloemen. And then it went from intern to senior coordinator when I came on full time. And then I feel like the stars just aligned. They needed someone. I happened to be there and knew a little bit of what I was doing. And then they honestly just somehow trusted me a ton. And I found myself running the team for a couple of years and was focusing on marketing and business development. And so that was kind of like my stretch at Vanderbloemen. For a few, I guess 3 years total, I served there. And then from there, I came to College Station, back where I graduated from college. And I work at Breakaway now. It's a large on-campus Bible study for college students at Texas A&M, and I'm the director of operations. So started as an operations lead here, took on a bunch of the financial realm of the organization, and that was part of me going into the director position.
Wow. Can you break down for us a little bit about Breakaway? I mean, you just say, hey, it's a large Bible study, and people are like, is that 30 people? Like, what is that? I know it's very complex. Talk to us about that ministry.
Yeah, no, it is an organization that's been around for 35 years. So legacy organization at this point. And we meet on campus at a public university every Tuesday night at 9 p.m., way past my bedtime.
Amen.
Amen. Anywhere from 2,000 to 10,000 students on a Tuesday
night.
So in the fall, we'll start with 8,000 students. Earlier this semester, we had like 7,000 students in there with a guest speaker. And I'm in charge of I always say I'm a glorified event planner for Tuesday nights. I just make sure everything happens, put out all the fires.
Yeah.
It's always something different. Last week, it was like, hey, Christa, we're about to open the doors, but the weather's really bad and a giant glass window just broke. What you want to do about it? I was like, great, let's solve this one. But Breakaway's been a huge blessing in my life and my husband's life. Yeah. And it's an honor to be back here and just work with college students. We have like 450 volunteers that make Breakaway happen every Tuesday night. Wow. Which is insane. We have like 8 full-time staff members, so we couldn't do it without them.
Wow. That's awesome. That's incredible. Such an insane ministry. I had several friends that went to A&M and talked so highly about that ministry. Director of operations is no joke, though. That's a big role.
Big role.
To be the person that gets the call when things like that happen. You got to be quick on your feet and all of that. Kind of talk to us about the importance. You know, Brett mentioned, if people are watching, you look very young. You've kind of climbed the ladder very quickly to be in the shoes that you're in. Talk to us about mentorship throughout that. You know, how did you make the decision to say yes to that next step? How did you kind of get led into those next steps? What did that look like for you? And who were the people that kind of walked through that season?
Yeah, no, it's kind of funny. I used to joke actually when I was at Vanderbloemen. They would say that I like accidentally girl bossed too hard was like a meme going around at the time.
Yes.
And I was like, somehow I did my job and they keep on giving me more responsibility and trust. And I don't really know how we got here.
Yeah.
And I do think it was just like, I wanted to serve faithfully wherever I was and give it all I had. And things lined up. And then mentors along the way were so helpful. I think in those first few years, I just wanted to be a sponge and learn as much as I could. I asked a bunch of questions. I remember asking William questions. Jennifer Paulson, your CRO, she honestly served in a mentor position to me that I wasn't expecting, and just kind of fell in that position for me. Her experience in different realms of the corporate world, and just bringing that to Vanderbloemen. There was a of sales when I first started that I felt was very similar to me, but about 10 years down the road. And I would like ask her questions and she would like give me advice of like, this is what I need you to know at this age that I didn't know. And these are the things that are coming around the corner that you should look ahead to. And so those were huge for my journey into that.
I think that's so good because we recommend that so often in our conversations of, hey, find someone that is 1 or 2 steps ahead and not just ask questions, but come alongside them, shadow what do you know now that you wish you'd have known back then? Yeah. And you were able to intentionally do that. And I think that's really helped prep you and prop you up to be able to take on these additional things.
Yeah.
But one thing that I think is important with your story too is it started with you kicking butt at your first role. Mm-hmm. You know, I think a lot of times young people go, but I want to do this in 5 or 10 years, and they forget to actually do a good job with what they're currently doing.
Right.
And maybe you've even seen that with some like volunteers within Breakaway where you're like, I really need you to hold this door open and greet people. I know you want to be this, and that, but start here. And then you can kind of build up that rapport. I did just want to side note, you said Breakaway is 35 years old and is a legacy ministry. I'm 35 years old, and I guess that means I'm a legacy ministry now. Is that what
You are a legacy.
that was like a low key diss? That was not even.
You are a living legacy.
Oh,
Brett.
wow. Okay, now I'll actually receive that.
Yeah,
That's
receive
good.
that. You take that. You take that and
Yeah,
run.
keep it coming, Christa. Keep it coming. No, I thinking about leading teams at Vanderbloemen, the complexity of leading different teams at Breakaway, and your age. Talk to me a little bit about, or us about, leading one-on-ones with people that may view you as more of a peer, but it's like, well, actually within the org chart, have you had any complications there, or how do you set the tone?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the reality that I've faced most of my career, of looking around being like, I'm the youngest in the room or the youngest at this table. And I think a lot of people probably my age struggle with imposter syndrome. How did I get here? Did I belong here? Or they feel the need to fake it until you make it. And I never was someone that could fake it. It was more so one of those things where I truly think the best things you can do is be humble and be confident and put those together, and a balance of those really well. Like, I know my age. I know there's only so much experience I have. I know people know a lot more than I do. I'm not going to act like that's not true. And I'm also going to be confident that there's a reason that the Lord and this team brought me to the table and they want to hear my voice. And I'm going to try to run with that and as best as possible. But I think humble and confidence is something that goes together really well, especially as a young leader.
Yeah.
And you mentioned this earlier, I think, Brett, it might have been before we got started, about EQ, but I think that's another thing is read the room you are in at all times.
Yep.
Whether it's a one-on-one, know who you're talking to, whether it's a table discussion, just know the room and who you're talking to and cater that towards that setting.
Yeah. That's a theme, is that humility yet confidence, because you don't want to walk into a room if you don't have a lot of knowledge of what's happening and you're overly confident. So you have to have that humility to kind of hold it back. But if you have too much humility to where you're not speaking at all, people may think you have zero leadership qualities.
Right.
So kind of a balancing act. It sounds like you've done such a phenomenal job of that in your career and still strive to continue with that. Tell me, what are some other skills that you kind of went into it with after college, even being an intern and then going full time with Vanderbloemen and in your career right now? What are some skills, tangible skills that you've taken with you to continue to do throughout your daily job?
Yeah, I think Vanderbloemen knows this better than anyone, but culture fit is the one that lasts the longest, in my opinion. I think a lot of things can be taught. A lot of things are teachable if you're willing to be teachable. So that's another thing, is be teachable.
Yeah.
But I think come in, learn the environment you're in. If you're the new person, don't act like you're not the new person. Ask the questions, try to learn the organization, learn the people. I think get to know the people that have been there longer than you, because they have a lot of historical knowledge to bring to the table that you don't have. And it's going to be really helpful and useful and guide you, especially if you're coming and leading a team and it's people that have been here longer than you have and you have to lead them now. Come in humbly and ask questions, see what their dynamics are, see what they're good at, value them. I just feel like a lot of it is just learning the dynamics of who is there, the organization, the culture, and figuring out how you can fit best in that and use your skill sets.
That's really good.
Yeah.
And I want to go a little off script, if that's okay, Christa.
That's fine.
But there's the run you had at Vanderbloemen, but there's also a little gap in there of graduating from college, and you had this slight Austin adventure. And I think that's really important to hear people of saying lessons learned. It's not always just I start here and I climb the ladder and look at me now. But can you share with us just a little bit of and I think there were some dynamics of, there wasn't at that time, there wasn't a full-time position at Vanderbloemen as you were getting close to graduating from college. And then you you went on a little let's call it Austin excursion for a little bit. I mean, it wasn't too long, and then all of a sudden Vanderbloemen, there was an opportunity, and we kind of sniped you, and you're like, thank God, that was not what I thought it was gonna be. Can you just share a little bit about that piece?
Totally.
Because I think that'll be encouraging for some people going, man, I thought I was signing up for this, and do I stay? Do I go? And you lived that out. So can you share some about that?
Yeah, no, I actually talk to this with my college students all of the time as they're like approaching graduation. And I was like, hey, your first job may not be your job forever.
Good.
Like, don't just quit, stick it out, put in the grunt work. But for me, I graduated in 2021. So 2020 was an interesting year.
What happened?
The job force was very rocky post-pandemic. And full-time jobs just weren't happening. I had people graduating, friends of mine that lost their job offers, people who were getting laid off, furlough. Just, it was a scary time in the job world. People were getting pay cuts. And so I kind of took the first like full-time job that came my way, which felt like the smart thing at the time. It still was. And it was recruiting. So it was a very corporate company in the Austin area. And I was like, I like people. I think I could do recruiting. But more than that, it's a full-time job. And that's where I'm going to go.
It's a paycheck.
Exactly. And so I was like, I have this degree. I need a job. And so I went to Austin, and I was there less than 3 months. And it very quickly was evident to me that, honestly, I wasn't a culture fit for this company in Austin. My skills were not being used. I was being pretty crushed by it. And I didn't see a long-term future there at all. And it was hard to admit that as someone who always like did something and felt like you could work it out or figure it out or push through. I always was raised like, you don't quit in the middle of the season, like you finish it out. And I quit my first job after about 2.5 months. And it was terrifying. And I actually called someone at Vanderbloemen, and I think they were like, actually, this is perfect. We have something if you want it, and we'll have you an offer like ASAP.
Wow.
Can you get to Houston fast?
Wow.
Total God story, total God timing. And within a couple weeks, I was moving from Austin to Houston, starting a new job, going from recruiting back to marketing. And I think that's another thing that's been really crucial to my success. And maybe it's lucky, maybe it's God timing, maybe it's the way I've searched for things, but I feel like the jobs that I've had at Vanderbloemen and at Breakaway have been the best use of my skill sets, like spiritual giftings and like true skill sets. And so I've been able to thrive best in those environments than the environments that just don't fit my skills.
Right. Okay. So I didn't get to work with Christa, sadly. So I don't know all of your story. And so I love getting to hear more about it. What you just talked about is so important. I'm glad you brought it up because that's happening a lot where you get in a job and all of a sudden you're like, wait, do I not like this? Is this not fitting my skills? Is this not where I'm supposed to be? But say you majored in something and so you're like, I have to do this after. And then you get in it and you're like, I don't think that I'm enjoying this.
Right.
For me, same thing. I graduated in 2020. I got a job 2 days before my wedding. And I was like, well, we have to pay rent and have jobs as adults. My husband didn't have a job. So I took this job kind of out of like a scarcity mindset, kind of not really knowing, got into it. I actually wish I would have left sooner because it was so not a fit. But I stayed for 9 months and it was damaging. Like you kind of said, it kind of crushed you in ways. It was super damaging to me, but I stayed because I didn't really know how to leave. And I think that, Gen Z kind of has a bad rep right now of like, boomers stayed at jobs for 40 plus years and millennials, Gen X, they stayed longer, and Gen Z is kind of having the reputation of they get there and they leave a little bit, But talk about the importance of leaving when it's time to leave, regardless of that timeline. Because like you said, 2.5 months, that was not the goal. That was not the plan. For me, those 9 months, not the goal, not the plan. But at the same time, when you're not being utilized, when your skills are not, there's like a part of you that kind of dies inside and it's not really worth your mental health, your mental sanity to stay. Talk about how to leave well when that wasn't the original plan.
It's good.
Yeah, leaving well is something I care a ton about. I feel like I've seen a lot of people leave not well. And I remember Cecilia, when I transitioned from Vanderbloemen, it was an organization I loved and still love, obviously. And I was like, how am I going to leave this team I love, this team who's been so great to me, the job I love, which also is part of my story. I was like not looking for other jobs, was pretty happy where I was. And the Lord very clearly made it known to me that I was going to pick up my life, move to a college town, and run operations for this ministry full time. And I remember having a very serious conversation with God and being like, if this is you, you are going to have to make it so dang clear, because I like my life here. We're doing good. I enjoy the city.
Yeah.
I like Houston. Like, married life is really fun here. We had a great church. And he just continued to make it really clear. And so that was a very different side of leaving than my first job. Whereas my first job, it was like, my mental state is diminishing. I'm becoming someone I don't like. This job is crushing me. I feel like it's pushing me in ways that are not pushing you to be the person that I want to be in a career setting, in a professional setting, in a spiritual setting, just in so many ways. And that made it clear to me I had to leave for those reasons. And it wasn't going to be something that was a stepping stone to the next thing of what I wanted to be.
Yeah.
You know, you have to kind of set yourself up for what's next. And so my first job, it was pretty corporate as far as like, I'm so sorry, I have to put my 2 weeks in. I'm going to actually pursue something in marketing again and go back to my major. And they were very like, it was pretty cut and dry of like, actually 2 weeks is unnecessary in this. You can drop off your computer and be gone today.
Oh, wow.
And I just was like, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so sorry this did not work out. Like, I'm so grateful for the training, so grateful for everything you poured into me.
Yeah.
And just left as best as I could. Whereas with Vanderbloemen, it was like very much the Lord made it clear. It's a little bit easier to leave when you're like following the Lord's calling and you like have a ministry setting to go into. And Vanderbloemen is very familiar with Breakaway and the organizations that they work with. And so it was a little bit easier to cheer alongside. And so I felt very supported when I first brought it up to them. And I think the thing I thought of was like, how can I leave this organization better than I left it? And I don't want to leave a gap. I don't want to leave it in a spot that's broken. I want to try to set them up as well as possible. And I think I like literally like typed up like a 6-month plan for like, since I left on, and I was like,
wow,
use it if it's helpful, don't if it's not. But like, I just want to give you everything I can. Call me whenever you need, because I just cared and I didn't want them to think I didn't.
Yeah.
That's really good. And I think what's helpful for listeners too, you're saying like, hey, I need this job. I think I could do this. And then as you got into it, you realized that didn't fit into your skill set. I think there might be some listeners who are trying to do the triangle piece in a square peg. And you talk about, hey, these skills I've developed, I've learned. Sometimes you don't learn those things until you're in a space that you're not thriving, you know, and you talk about Gen Z, where is it me or is it you?
Right.
And I think it's a little bit of both between like organization and young professionals trying to figure out what that dance is. So could you share, I mean, backing that up even further, like your degree in college, like how did you land on that? Like understanding like these are the things that I like to do, because I talk with, you know, I did like a cohort with an organization this week, and there were some people that are like, I was in this and now I'm in this, and like they're in their mid-20s and they're going like, I'm not using my major, or maybe I didn't go to college. I'm still trying to figure out what those skill sets are and kind of hone that in. So backing that up even further, how did you even land on like, this is my major and like this is kind of the course that I feel like the Lord's leading me to go in?
Yeah.
Totally. I think that's so common. I think in your 20s, a lot of it is floundering and like, what am I good at? It's hard to know. I mean, if
it
you
doesn't
don't have
stop in your 30s. I'll just share with you. There's more to come.
Great. Something to look forward to. But I do think that a lot of it is trial and error, figure out things. Something I felt like early in my 20s I was blessed with. So I ended up in business school at A&M, and it was just because it felt like a safe choice. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but my dad worked in business. It felt like a safe choice. I feel like it can kind of go into everything, which is a lot of business students that end up in business school. And so I did that, and I think I learned a lot through these assessments or different conversations. And a lot of it was like finding out what you're good at. What do you enjoy? What are you passionate about? What are your skills aligned with? What are your skills? Are you an organized person? Are you not an organized person? Are you type A or type B? And a lot of it was just like assessing yourself. And I think they kind of forced me to do that a lot, which paid dividends in the end. Because I think a lot of people don't get that. And you graduate and you're like, I don't know what kind of worker I am. I don't know what kind of team member I am. I don't know where my skills could fit. And I actually had this conversation. It was similar to spiritual giftings. On Sunday, we talked about it at church. And they said the best way to figure out your spiritual gifts is just to start serving and see, like, what are you good at? What are people affirming you? Like, just get started and see, like, what do you enjoy and what do people affirm in you? And I think that's kind of how it was a little bit. Like, I think I like marketing. I think I could do that. And then a little bit as I like got into it more of like, okay, I think I know how to do this. I think they think I'm good at this. I think I'm doing it right. I think there's KPIs and metrics that are showing this is working. And you just kind of grow in that. And then I also always knew, which helped in leading a team, was like, I'm very admin oriented. I'm very organizational. I love a Google Calendar. I love all the lists.
Amen.
I love checking things off. And that's just been something through my whole life. Like, my mom was able to look at me and tell me that, of like, you've had lists for your list since you were about 7 years old.
Amazing.
And I like truly found a career where I get to have lists all day and check things off of a list on a Tuesday night and make sure everything gets planned for Tuesdays for our Bible study. And it's been great. And I think a lot of it is just like evaluating through my life, what are the things that I'm good at? What are the things I enjoy? What comes easy and natural to me? And it just kind of started to make sense somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of going off of that. So you make lists of lists and all the things. You're very organized. How do you, though, on some days or mundane or some weeks or whatever, maybe you got things going on personally, whatever that looks like, how do you stay motivated at your 8 to 5 to stay on task, keep doing what you're doing, chase towards those goals? What are ways that you do that? Because I know that sometimes that's hard. Life is life. Sometimes you can't be 100% at work like you want to be, or sometimes you set a goal that you didn't hit, or sometimes you had a meeting that was not as much fun as you thought it was going to be. What are some ways that you deal with that?
Yeah, this is kind of funny. Brett will laugh at this because it's very Enneagram 7 fashion.
Here we go. Good.
But I always say have a lot of fun outside of work. I think I have to balance it. Like, I need to find the things within work. And so for me, it's been working in settings that culturally are fun, that there's people I enjoy, there's things to look forward to. And I've happened to work for organizations, for the most part, that I like really agree with. I care about the mission and the purpose, and that drives me a lot of the way. I'm able to align even the mundane days, even the days I'm doing budget codes and coding expenses. Like, I know it's because I'm stewarding these donor dollars really well. Like, I can just align with that. And then outside of work, I try to take care of myself. I try to have a lot of fun, spend a lot of time with my friends and family, and have that balance. It's not all work and no play kind of thing.
No.
I don't think I would survive well in that kind of atmosphere.
Yeah, that's fair.
And for me, I have certain ways that I escape. And so for me, when I lived in Houston, it was every morning at 5 a.m. I would go to a cycling class before work because it cleared my mind. It was the only thing that fully cleared my mind before work. And I could walk in feeling really refreshed. For me now, it's a lot of walks and a lot of reading that just like clears my mind a lot. And that feels like my time, my escape. Yeah. And so I even remember getting married when I worked at Vanderbloemen and being like, well, now I'm a wife and that takes priority over my job and I'm trying to figure this out. And Andrew used to have this saying where he would know when I was coming home and bringing work home. And he's like, work Krista's here. Like, not wife Christa, because I would like come home in a zone, like ready, like drill sergeant, you know, and very much in my mood. And after a few weeks of that, I was like, oh, I need to figure out how to leave that at work. And a lot of it was just like on my drive home, figuring out how to like separate those two. And yeah, I think you just kind of, it's a lot of trial and error for me. But I think as far as burnout, for me, I used to tell people like, I'm 100% yours when I'm here, 110% yours when I'm here. And when I go home, I'm going to home to my sweet husband and I'm going to be a wife. And unless it's an emergency, I will handle it tomorrow morning when I'm back here at 8.
Mm-hmm.
But don't call me unless you have to.
Yeah.
And I just had to figure out what those priorities were. And I think it varies by your role. It varies by your team and by your job.
Yeah.
For me, I have college students right now, and they don't really get that I actually work a 9 to 5. And they like to text me in the evenings or like on Saturdays. And a lot of times I'm like, hey, this sounds great. I'll respond on Monday. Or like, hey, I'll handle this when I get back in office.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would say, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to mention it, because I was like, man, we're kind of putting Christa on this like pedestal of like, she just works. And I was like, for those who know you, like you work 100%, like you were saying, like 110%.
Yeah.
But then you also like play hard. It'll be like, oh,
Yeah.
Christa and Andrew are in Iceland. Okay, I'm seeing that on their Instagram. Like you're like always saying like, what's the thing that we can plan next? You know, there's something to look forward to. I think Andrew was telling me that like even when you go grocery shopping, you find a treat. You know, it's like, hey, let's have something fun in the mundane. And so I think that's important to keep in front of like young listeners too. Of hey, don't just check bunch of boxes, but like take care of the home base. That's what's going to keep you really going on your mission and vision, even in your career.
Yeah, that's good.
Good. And I'll say we ask every guest this one question. Okay, do you want to ask it? No, we should ask it at the same time or every other word.
If it's my New Year's resolution you're about to ask me for.
No. Okay, so
well, not want to ask that.
Okay, so side story. I was on a podcast where Christa was hosting, and it was like start of the new year, and she was like, "I'm not sharing mine. So she asked me, and I think there was like one or two other people on. And then she's like, and that's all we have time for. And so we never got to know her New Year's resolution. So I always said, if I'm ever hosting a podcast and you're the guest, I'm going to ask.
Oh, Brett, you should have asked.
I was just going to leave it. I definitely thought about it, but I'm like, is this episode coming out like in April? So like,
it's a little late.
I was like, maybe a little late.
At this point, the resolutions are done.
They're done. They already happened.
I had really good intentions.
That's
in
hilarious,
January,
though.
But no, that's not the question. The main question is, now that you're so seasoned in ministry as like, how old are you? 25, 26?
26 now.
Oh, wow. Time flies when you're having fun and serving the Lord and his people.
Crazy. You met me at like probably a 20-year-old kid.
I know. But 26, what do you know now as a grizzly veteran to the workforce?
Oh my God.
That you say, man, I wish I'd have known that when I was 20.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. What would I have wished I known?
Like when you were starting at Vanderbloemen and you were talking to the person that was a couple of steps ahead of you, what was she telling you? Or he? I know who it was, but for the sake of mystery.
I think a lot of it was work is a big thing, but it's not everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like you do not need to be identified by your title, by the dollar that comes in the door every 2 weeks. I think at the end of the day, like there's not enough money in the world to make me happy. I've taken pay cuts for certain positions and it was the best decision ever. And I've been a happier person. I've been a better person. I've been a better believer. I've been a better wife. And I'm happier, and I actually make less money probably in certain like seasons of life, and it was worth it, and I don't regret that.
That's good. I love that. Well, Christa, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and telling us a little bit about your story. I know that we have tons of listeners in the realm of different seasons of life that a lot of what you said hopefully will resonate with them, and we just appreciate you telling your story and learning more about it.
This was a blast. We should do it again sometime, Christa.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for listening to A Higher Purpose at Vanderbloemen podcast. I loved today's episode with Christa. One of my favorite things she talked about was that balance between coming in with humility and confidence. Such a hard thing to balance, but it's such a phenomenal thing to learn when you're getting started in your career and to keep all the way throughout your career. So thanks for listening. If you want to find us, you can go to ahigherpurposepodcast.com and listen to any of our other episodes. You can also find us on socials at A Higher Purpose Podcast. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.